Many of us, when we get into business, have a dream, this nugget of an idea that could blossom into something more amazing and incredible that you could provide to the rest of the world around you. It's exciting to have that. The challenge is that dream is in our mind. And it's hard sometimes to get it out of our mind into the minds of others, other customers, vendors, investors who need to come alongside you to support you in making that dream a reality. But we need to do that. Before I started getting onto the news and larger platforms, I hired a coach. And my coach and I sat down and took a look at what I was going to share, or at least what I wanted to share with the world. And I thought I was all ready. I had the right ideas, the right things put together. But my coach looked at me and said, Mike, you're not ready. You're not even close. And the reason is I wanted to share the ideas that about how great our business was. But the reality is the listener just doesn't care. The person listening wants support and help through the problems that they are facing. And so we had to figure out what that was in the listener and how to craft a message to best support them. And it took us months to get that right. But once we did, we started getting booked on much larger platforms. And so we have to understand what message we want to convey, package it in a way that people actually want to receive it. And when we start to do that, that's when the magic happens. People get your idea and are willing to come alongside you to make your idea a reality. And I am so excited today to have on our show a guest that is an expert in this. His name is Danny Brassel, and he is a highly sought after speaker with 3,500 audiences worldwide that he's engaged with. He's authored 16 books, and he's known as the Jim Carrey with the PhD. Danny, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike, and thanks for spreading some joy and some knowledge around the world. I appreciate it.
I love it. Dude, you know this space like the back of your hand since you've been on so many different podcasts and you've shared your message so many different times across the world. How do you think about crafting a message to deliver to an audience?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's one of my specialties. Like you said, I speak over 100 days a year all over the world to different audiences. But one of my little sidetracks that was really just because of COVID, I needed to make extra income, and so I started working with entrepreneurs and executives and small business owners on crafting presentations that get their audience to take the next step, whether that's to purchase their product or to donate to their cause or to simply invest in their idea. And there's a structure. There's lots of formulas out there. You'll see it. There's wonderful people teaching lots of different things. Many lifetimes ago, I used to be a reporter, and I covered a politician, and he used to always give the same speech about 20 times a day. And so what I do is I help craft what I call a stump speech. You'll hear some people call it a signature talk. You can call it peanut butter and jelly. The terminology doesn't matter, but it's a structure on how do you connect with an audience that doesn't know you. And if you do that the right way, you should be able to help a lot of people, and your audience specifically. They always have to just remember there's a wonderful trainer, Donald Miller out of Nashville, has a great company called Story Brand. And I love one of the things he says. He says, your job is to be the guide and to portray your audience as the hero. So you're Yoda, they're Luke Skywalker. You're Hamish, they're Katniss Everdeen, whatever example you want to use. And I completely agree with him on that. And you said something in your intro, which I was like, yes, he gets it, Mike. I mean, all your audience cares about, they don't care about your product. All they care about is a solution to their problem. And you said that so well.
That's awesome. So when you start crafting this message, you start, as you mentioned, with making the customer the hero. Where do you start taking it from that? Like, what are the tangible steps you take when you're crafting that
Okay.
message?
Yeah, that's great. I'll take you exactly through what I teach. So basically, I teach a four-step process, and I've had lots of wonderful teachers that have trained me over the years. Lynn Eskridge did a ton of work with me. Pat Quinn, I think, is the best in the business. And all of them have their own little formulas. I've heard Pete Vargas, he says, Pete always says, first off, you want to talk to the heart, then you want to talk to the head, and then you want to talk to the hand, and then you want to talk to the heart again. Um,
Mm.
uh, a lot of people will say, first off, you want to connect, and then you have to teach content, and then you have a call to action, and then you connect again. We always have to have acronyms or alliteration to learn these things. The way I basically teach it is you have your introduction, then you have your instruction, then you have an invitation to the audience on how they can work with you further, and then you end your presentation with inspiration. And so in the introduction, the most important thing is really to connect with your audience. If you can't connect with your audience, the rest of the presentation doesn't matter at all. And so,
Mm.
uh, Pat teaches something I like. He says you need to show that you're ordinary, you're extraordinary, and you have to demonstrate your why. I don't think you really have to demonstrate that you're extraordinary, because the fact that you're on a stage, whether it's on a podcast or on a public stage in front of people or even at a business meeting, the fact that you're being asked to speak positions you as an authority. And there's a simple trick on how to make you sound extraordinary. I mean, one of the things I do is I craft my introduction. I have somebody introduce me, and I make them, they're reading it aloud, and the introduction makes me sound like Jesus Christ. And when I get on stage, I'm like, yeah, Jesus Christ forgot to wear his dress socks today, because that's the key. Is don't talk about your successes, talk about your failures, because not everybody in your
Mm.
audience has succeeded, but they've all failed, they've all struggled. And the moment you can demonstrate that you're just like them, they're going to love you. I use political examples all the time. This has nothing to do with politics, but one of the geniuses of this was President Reagan. President Reagan was a very successful actor in Hollywood, living in a mansion in Bel Air. He was a multimillionaire, and yet he was able to connect in audiences in a way that an auto worker in Detroit thought, hey, I could have a beer with that guy. Well, that's powerful that he was able to connect with an extraordinarily different audience than that. And so that's really the process I take people through, is how do you craft a really powerful introduction. The content's not really as important. The instruction part, a lot of people don't understand this. I actually do everything. Yes, I do have the PhD. So research actually matters to me. Your opinion doesn't matter to me. If somebody says you're a good speaker, that doesn't mean anything to me. I want to actually look at data. Let's see if you're selling things. Let's see if you're getting that audience to convert to take the next step. And so there's lots of research that shows audiences remember the beginning of your presentation and the end of your presentation, but they don't remember anything in between. And so the way to remember that is, oh my goodness, the bun is more important than the burger. It doesn't really matter what you're
Mm.
teaching them. What matters is that you're connecting with them and that you're actually helpful to your audience. I see a lot of shysters out there, and they're just selling. It's a big pitch fest, but they don't ever do anything to actually help audiences. And so whenever I'm training people, I actually train them that during that presentation, you need to do something that is going to help every single member of that audience, which is very important to me. The other thing I don't like that people train, I see a lot of people teach people to tell the saddest stories of their life. And I'm a little bit different than that. Mike, I can't do that. I'll tell you why. First of all, the world just survived a global pandemic. Everybody's had something very bad happen to them. I don't think the world needs another sob story. I think people need to hear hope stories. I think one of our
Mm.
responsibilities is that people leave our presentation feeling better than when they entered the presentation. Second of all, I mean, I have a friend, and he gives a presentation where he talks about his daughter being murdered. I don't know about you, Mike. You got to be a stronger person than me to talk about the worst moment of your life 1,000 times. There's no way I could do that. I want to have fun every time I'm going up on stage. And then the third point I make, and this is where people get irritated with me, you know, I have one objective. I want people laughing, engaged, feeling good about themselves. I can tell the same joke again and again. And there's something noble about wanting people to laugh and to smile. I believe that most of these people, most of these salespeople that tell these sad stories all the time, After the 25th time they've told that story, those are crocodile tears. At this point now, they're just being
Mm.
manipulative and they're just using pain to try and trigger something in their audience. I don't like that at all. I think it's very manipulative, and people get angry with me for that, but I stand by that. I want people laughing. I want them feeling good, and I want to give them some tools that'll give them a quick win.
Interesting. So the whole point there is that human connection, it's how they feel, and they have some useful tools, as you mentioned. The first step was the introduction. And you talked about the importance of creating this powerful introduction where people uh, see you as an authority, but they're like them, right? You're showing the same struggles. What methods to use to communicate that so people feel like you are human?
Well, I kind of joke about that, Mike, because have you ever noticed that most personal development gurus never grew up middle class? They all grew up in a
Mm.
garage, or they had to wash dishes in their bathtub, I mean, it's always the same story. You'll be like, oh, I was homeless, living under a bridge, and a truck drove over the bridge one day, hit a speed bump, and a book fell out and it hit me on the head because I was sleeping because I was homeless and I didn't have anything to do because I was homeless. So I started reading the book, and it was about how to invest in real estate with no money down, and it kind of made sense to me, you know. And so I started applying the principles, and I bought a couple of properties, and then my homeless buddies started coming up and asking me, "Hey, can you teach me how to invest in real estate with no money?" I mean, it's always the same talk, you know. I grew up. I've never heard a person say, "Yeah, I lived. I had two great parents, and I had all kinds of wonderful experiences in school." People always want to talk. It's silly to me. The way you connect.
Mm.
I'll give this is something for your audience right now. I'll do typically. I do seminars. Usually with small groups, about 10 people, with my friend Jimmy Nelson. He was on Broadway, he was on TV, so he's really good with the stagecraft. And I had done stand-up comedy, and I've been a teacher and a professor, and so we go into the research, but also a couple of things on the stage. We'll do that over 2 days with a small group of people, and they get to watch each other, which is just as important as doing it on your own. But after 2 days, I say, you know, we've given you the fire hose, we've crafted your presentation, you understand the formula now. But what I want you to do is get a libation of choice, a pen and paper, and I want you tonight to write down every story that's ever happened in your life. And I don't mean write the whole story, I just mean triggers. So, like the time I locked myself out of the car in front of Costco, the time dad spilt mustard on his tie at that fancy restaurant. And you'll find, Mike, you can do this. You'll find that within an hour, you'll come up with 400 to 500 stories, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. So that's the first part of the exercise. The second part of the exercise is then you try and figure out, well, what's this story about? Oh, well, this story is
Mm.
really a story about responsibility. Oh, this is a story about overcoming adversity. Oh, this is a story about building better relationships. And so if you ever go on my computer has literally tens of thousands of stories in folders. Like whenever I need a story on loyalty, I'm like, okay, I'll go to the loyalty file. Okay, I have 80 different stories. And a lot of people freak out. I was working with a guy 2 days ago, and he said, oh, nothing ever's happened to me, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I said, okay, all right, so we'll say that nothing ever happened to you. One of the most successful personal development books of all time is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Mm.
That's a book in which he shares no personal stories whatsoever. He shares stories of the millionaires that he interviewed. So you don't even have to use your own stories. You can use other
Oh.
people's stories, and you see this all the time. Good speakers are constantly using examples of other people, so you can do that as well. And so that's just a real quick strategy for everybody. If you don't think you have anything that can help you connect with the audience, start writing down those stories. And my personal preference is childhood stories, because everybody peed their pants in first grade, and you tell a story like that, and everybody's going to love you for that. You know, I work with some people. Every now and then, actually working with speakers. I'm usually working with business people that are trying to get better at speaking, but sometimes I'm talking with speakers. So I mean, I have one gal I work with. She won 4 gold medals in the Olympics. I have one guy. He climbed Mount Everest. Right now, he's in the South Pole. He's like the most amazing human being ever. And they have extraordinary stories, but think about this, Mike. Most people in the audience haven't climbed Mount Everest. Most people in the audience have
Mm.
not competed in the Olympics. They can't relate to that person, but everybody can relate to the person that, they peed their pants, or they got beat up by a bully. I mean, those are the types of stories that we can relate. And so I'm always looking for those types of stories. And I'll just, you know, I was doing this the other day with people. They're like, "Well, take us through it." I'm like, "Okay, well, I had to create. I actually have like 50 different signature talks, 50 different stump speeches, 50 whatever you want to call them, following the formula." And so I gave an example. I used to teach elementary school. I'm like, when I was an elementary school teacher, every other teacher at the school went through hundreds, if not thousands, of band-aids every single school year. I mean, kids love band-aids. They work better than smokes on the prison yard. Well, every single year, I went through exactly one band-aid. And my colleagues always ask me, how can you do that, Danny? Well, on the first day of school, there's always a chubby kid in my class. We'll call him Paco. He's picking on his scab all morning. Finally, after lunch, he has some success, and the annoying little girl next to him raises her hand, wipes her nose, and says, "Miss Brassel, Paco's bleeding." I go over to Paco. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Paco, you are bleeding. You know what you need? You need a Band-Aid." Now 33 little heads are looking at me all smiling. I say, I actually have in my desk an entire drawer full of Band-Aids, and I don't have ordinary Band-Aids. I got Mighty Morphin Power Ranger Band-Aids. And I'm going to give you the Green Ranger because he's the coolest. Now Paco's smiling. Every kid's all excited. I take Paco by the hand to my desk. I take out the Band-Aids. Oh, before I put on the Band-Aid, we got to clean out the wound. So then I take out the bottle of the clear liquid that says rubbing alcohol. And you say, "Paco, hold on to my fist. This might sting a little bit." I pour the rubbing alcohol on his scab. He starts screaming, "Ah!" I put on the Band-Aid. I say, "Okay, anybody else need a Band-Aid?" Mike, my kids can have a skull fracture and they will never ask me for a Band-Aid. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm not going to give you any Band-Aids. I'm going to give you practical strategies on how to craft a presentation that connects you with your audience. You see what I just did there? I took the
Mhm.
story, was able to connect it to a topic, and this is all we're doing. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I work with, and a lot of people, since humor is my thing, a lot of people ask me to add humor. I mean, there's all kinds of little things you can do to add humor. You don't have to be Jim Gaffigan. You don't have to be a stand-up comedian. All you have to do is to get people in your audience to smile every now and then. I was working with an Indian engineer, and he's very introverted and not a lot of personality. So he hired me to give him some personality in his presentation. I'm not going to tell you his real name, but it was a difficult name to pronounce, and so we started his presentation now. So he says, "Hello, my name is Mahajin Sahariji. Gee, I sure hope I'm pronouncing that correctly." And what it did is it got the audience to laugh. They immediately thought, "Oh,
Sure.
he's making fun of himself," which is the best way for. I don't appreciate
Yeah.
people that make fun of other people. The person you should be making fun of is yourself. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
if you're talking about you and your wife, you better be Homer Simpson in every single one of these. Like the wife better be smarter. You need to be the butt of the joke because people are going to like you.
Yeah.
People don't like the know-it-all. Like again, I've
I
never seen
love
a presidential candidate say they were born in a mansion. They were always born in a log cabin and they were dirt poor. It's always the exact same thing because that's more relatable to
yeah,
people. So I'm
I
sorry,
love
I give
that.
you I give you long answers to short questions, but I get excited about this stuff, Mike.
Yeah, dude, I think the one really interesting thing is you listen to Danny speak. When he went into the Band-Aid story, something happens in people's minds. It happened in my own mind where you just kind of get into this like almost like a trance. Like you're just engaged with how in the world does he get away with only giving one Band-Aid, right? Green Power Ranger, putting it on there, and then the scream of the kid. But that that there's something in the human brain that just connects with story like
Mhm.
none other. And so if you can tie that story in to then the core lesson, just as you did, that core point after that story, you can deliver that value to people in a way that they can truly receive. Now you talked about so you talked about the intro, and you talked about this notion of a bun where people really remember the beginning and they really remember the end. not so much in between. I want to go to the end. How do you deliver that value? What do you do in the end to really bring it home?
Yeah, so the end is, we call it hitting the landing. Like the gymnast always has to hit the landing at the end, because if you blow the ending, then I mean, that's what the last thing, that's the last taste that you're giving people of. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to, again, strike a pose where you're making that you're getting the audience to remember you. I always tell people, if you want to get better at speaking, again, I know that most of your audience, they're not speakers. I'm not asking people to be speakers, but speaking is really the fastest way to grow your business, or to help fund your nonprofit, or even if you're just a teacher at a faculty meeting, how do you gain more influence? How do you get people to accept your ideas? Well, you become interesting. You tell better stories and things like that. And that's all I'm ever trying to do with people, is what can we do to get you so that you're memorable. And so there's two ways that you get better at speaking. First of all, you have to watch speakers. I mean, I watch at least 10 speakers a day. I mean, I watch comedians, I watch politicians, I watch televangelists, I watch people in front of large groups, in front of small groups, in front of all men, in front of all women, international, all over the place. I'll give your audience one of my little ninja strategies here right now.
Yeah.
So one of the things I do a lot, Mike, is I watch award shows. Why? Well, when the person wins the Academy Award, or the Grammy Award, or the American Music Award, they only have about 45 seconds to give a speech. Now, most people waste their opportunity. Most people get up there like, I want to thank the Academy. I want to thank God. It's stupid. It's just not interesting at all. But every now and then, somebody is able to really knock it out of the park. So the example I've been giving people, I can't remember his name. I think it was Joe Walker. It was at the Academy Awards a couple of years ago, and the category was for best film editing. Well,
Mm.
these are all like famous movie stars. Oh, we don't need to pay attention to editors or whatever. And Joe was British, and he gets up there, and so nobody's really paying attention because it's best editing. And he gets up there and he says, a lot of people don't know this, but when phrased properly, the term Academy Award nominee can be used as an insult. Well, now he's got the attention of the audience. And he says, for example, yesterday I got in an argument with my 17-year-old daughter, and she said, well, Academy Award nominee Joe Walker. All of a sudden, you're watching the entire audience laughing. I watched him get off stage. Brad Pitt wanted to meet him. Sandra Bullock wanted to meet him. Denzel Washington wanted to meet him. I was reading Time magazine later that week, had an article about the Academy Award, said it was one of the highlights of the entire broadcast. That's the power of connection in 30 seconds. Joe Walker, I hope that's his name, but this guy, he did an amazing job. That's what you're trying to do, is connect. So the first thing to get better is you got to watch other people. The second part, one of my mentors was a guy named Jim Rohn, and Jim had a phrase I always liked. He said, you can't pay other people to do your push-ups. And what that means
Mm.
is you got to practice. You got to do the reps. And I just did the last 2 days I've been doing a training with a small group of entrepreneurs, and I was challenging them because the guy that I just my pride and joy. Last year, it was exactly last January, I had a gentleman, Gustavo. The guy should run for president of the United States. He's the great American success story. He came to America from Ecuador, didn't speak a word of English, did all of these menial jobs, took every spare dime, invested in real estate, became very wealthy in real estate. And so now what he does is he coaches people how to make a fortune in real estate. So he has a 4-month coaching program that he charges $40,000 for. Wow, Mike, that's a big ask. $40,000 for a coach. I mean, I'm usually teaching people how to get a $5,000 coaching program. Like he's
Yeah.
asking $40,000. I'm like, wow. And I challenged Gustavo. I said, hey, you got to do the work. You got to do the reps. The first time you deliver this, it's going to stink. The second time, it's going to stink, but it's going to stink a little bit less. The third time, it'll stink a little bit less, and you'll get used to it after a while. I mean, you need to go on podcasts. You need to go speak to elementary schools. Go to local service organizations, Rotary Club, Lions Club, Optimist Club, Kiwanis Club. Speak at the Chamber of Commerce. Speak at the synagogue, at the church. You just need to speak. And so poor Gustavo, he says, well, I'm on a podcast later tonight. And I'm like, okay, tonight's your opportunity, Gustavo. You got to make the pitch. And so The next day, Mike, Gustavo calls me up all excited. He's like, Danny, you're a genius. I'm like, did you make the pitch? He said, yes. I'm like, did you sell any? He said, 23.
What?
Mike, reading's my specialty, not math. If I'm
Yeah.
doing my math correctly, he made $920,000 that night on a pitch we had created that afternoon. I need to start charging people a percentage or something. I was like, oh my gosh. And since then, so this is a year later, he doesn't have a 7-figure business. He has an 8-figure business. This guy's amazing. I had another guy
Wow.
3 years ago, and I just told him, I'm like, well, why don't you go on Facebook Live every day? It's low stakes. I mean, nobody will watch, but it gives you a chance to practice. And so the first day he said he did a Facebook Live, and one person from like Ontario, Canada accidentally got on. And so he did it for that person. He did a horrible job. And the next day he had like 3 or 4 people. Day after that, he had like 20, by 2 weeks, he had like 100 people. Within a month, he had several hundred people. And now he has a Facebook community of like 6,000 raving fans who buy everything he offers. Now I don't believe he has a 7-figure business now, but he has a very high 6-figure business. But this is a guy who had nothing 3 years ago, but he did something. I can't emphasize this enough. Okay. So, and I love something you said in your intro, Mike, how you hired a coach, because that's what I always tell people. Like, you hire a coach. I made the decision. I always tell people I'm a weight loss expert. I've lost over 1,000 pounds. The problem is I've gained over 1,210 pounds for a net gain of 210 pounds. And so last year I decided I'm going to hire a nutritionist. And it was ironic because his name is Dr. Lazarus. And I said, okay, you're going to bring me back from the dead, Dr. Lazarus. And he was great. He was a great coach because he changed my mindset. He said, Danny, I want you to stop thinking about losing weight and start thinking about gaining years. Wow, that was a cool comment. It reframed things. He said, hey, Danny, I'm not telling you to stop drinking bourbon, but instead of having 4 glasses, have 3. I thought, yeah, I can do
Yeah.
that. And he gave me simple things. And in 1 year's time, and I'm a competitive person. He knew that about me, so we just had our 1-year check-in. And I mean, I had to go in every 2 weeks. I always called it my fat tax. He's monitoring things, but he showed me that in 1 year, I lost 15% of my body weight. I went from 251 pounds to 209 pounds. I went from a waistline of 40 inches to a waistline of 35 inches. He said, you've just cut your risk of cancer in half, and your risk. I mean, it was awesome, but he was a coach. My wife, she asked me to fix the toilet a couple of weeks ago. And so I called a plumber, and she was mad at me. She's like, why did you call the plumber? That cost a lot of money. I'm like, yeah, I get paid a lot of money to speak because I'm really good at speaking. I'm not really good at fixing toilets. I got an expert who knows how to fix a toilet. He fixed the toilet. It was quick. He did a great job. He earned every single penny. If I had done it, it would have taken forever. It would have been done incorrectly. We probably would have gotten in an argument over it. And it probably ultimately would have cost me more money than if I had hired the plumber. So I love that
Yeah.
about you when you said you hired some. Yeah, if you don't know something, you hire somebody. I've hired coaches my entire life. I have marketing coaches. I have speaking coaches. I have, now I have a nutrition coach. That's what you do. And that's the rewarding thing about coaching others is, this is what you and I, Mike, we both have our own specialties, and it seems really obvious to us, but not to our clients. Our clients are like, wow, you sound like Yoda all the time. You're like, wow, I didn't know that. Well, yeah, because it's something that came naturally to us. I mean, I don't know about plumbing, to my plumber, he knows a lot about plumbing. So you hire a coach is the important thing, I think. And I'm trying to remember what the original question is. I have this tendency of going off on a tangent.
Yeah. So what did you do with that coachee that you helped him get that $900,000 worth of sales that night? What did you tell him to really change things for him?
Yeah, that's probably the most important part of the seminar to all my clients. I mean, day one, we break the talk into 4 different parts. And so the beginning, the morning of day one, we talk about the opening. In the afternoon, we talk about your instruction. And then day 2 are what we talk about the invitation to the audience or your call to action. And then we talk about how do you inspire your audience. And so that call to action is where even people I've worked with, some pretty successful, pretty famous people. Even those people, they get tense because the human
Mm,
brain, it knows when somebody's serving them, and it also knows when somebody's selling them. And so that's what we're really trying to review with people is, I need to convince you when you're on stage that you're not selling anything. You're serving your audience. You have the antidote. And if they don't get it, they're going to die. And if you believe that, if you truly believe that you are helping this person, then you can have a huge impact. I mean, Zig Ziglar, one of my favorite mentors of all time, Zig was flabbergasted that he had, I can't remember, he had one of his workers just go through like 100 letters randomly to figure out which made a bigger difference to people, seeing him in live in person or purchasing his products. And I think it came back out of 100 letters, 90 of them were based on the products and only 10 of them were based on his speeches. And for 30 years, he had thought that it was his speeches that were making the impact, but it wasn't the speeches. It was the, older, it was audio cassettes that people were purchasing and books and things like that. And so that's what I always tell people is you can only serve an audience a little in 45 minutes. You got to give them,
mm,
basically you're that person at Costco with samples. You're giving people a free sample. This is what I can give you, but I can't fill you in 45 minutes. You come and coach with me, man, I'll get you done. I just worked with a guy, Alberto. He's got a great niche. So he's a veterinarian for competitive horses. And he had to give a TED talk, and we worked on his TED talk. And I'm so dang proud of him because Alberto, he just knocked it out of the park. We decided, I'm like, hey, you work with horses. That gives us all kinds of opportunities for puns, So like for business advice, you can say, oh, you fall off the horse, you get back on. You can talk about your products that you offer all courses for all horses. There's just so many different, whenever people that retire and then get back in, you get back on the saddle again. There's so many different horse expressions, and that's what we worked. I love it. I actually have a lot of fun putting those together with people. One of the gals I was working with yesterday, we were brainstorming, and she was interesting too. She had a great niche too. Maybe this is my new niche, working with people with horses. So she is in Houston, and she works with professional polo players, and I guess all these polo players, they don't know how to get proper saddles for their horses, because a saddle, basically, I don't know anything about this, but basically the saddle, most of them pick it based on their own personal comfort, but they disregard the comfort of the horse. And
mm,
so what I told her, I'm like, oh, well, what we'll craft it on is let's start watching mattress commercials, because mattress commercials, that's always the sales point is, you can live healthy and do all the things right, but if you don't have the right bed and aren't getting the right sleep, you're not at your maximum capacity every single day. The same thing with a horse is you can put the horse in the fanciest stable and give it the best hay, but if ultimately you've given it a bad saddle, you're giving yourself a disadvantage. And competitive athletes understand the
mm,
impact of just these little
yeah.
things. There's all kinds of documentation. Remember the Deflate Gate with the New England Patriots. Oh, the balls they weren't inflated. And I'm like, well, I guess you might notice that if you're a professional football player. I didn't know
Yeah.
that before. So
That's
that's what we're doing, Mike. I love listening to people, and I love just seeing people from totally diverse industries. It's because I used to be a journalist. I'm very curious about people, and I love learning about what they do and finding out what their aspiration is. Yeah, because some people have different aspirations. Not everybody wants to, even though Gustavo now has an 8-figure business, not everybody wants an 8-figure business. Some
yeah.
people, I watch a great show on History Channel called The Foods That Built America, and it's
Oh yeah, good
fascinating. Some of
show.
these guys, yeah, it's one of my favorite shows. Like some guys, they'll sell out their business for like $1 million, and you're like, you sold it for $1 million, but you could have made 5 billion. But to them, $1 million was, they're like, great, $1 million. I'm going to drink lemonade the rest of my life and sit in my hammock. Some people don't want to
I
work
love that.
24/7. I'm like, oh, and so that's what I love. I love that people are very different. I love that they're different because that means we all have different audiences that we can reach.
Yeah. Well, dude, I feel like we could talk all day long about this. This has been so much fun. I think the one thing that I'm kind of really took away there at the end that you said that was super interesting was about really thinking about that audience member and what you're going to be doing that serves them. But also remembering that if you truly believe that you're helping them solve their core issue, it's not sales. It's actually support and service to them. And if we get that right in our minds, things can really change for the better. Danny, how can people get a hold of you to learn more about you and your services?
Well, thank you, Mike, so much. That's great. That was a great teaching point. As a thank you to you and your audience for bearing with me for 25 minutes, I wanted to give you a couple of freebies. So if you go to freegiftfromdanny.com, again, freegiftfromdanny.com, I'm going to give everybody a complimentary e-copy of my book, Read, Lead, and Succeed. This is a book I wrote for an elementary school principal who was trying to keep his faculty and staff positively engaged all year. So I said, okay, I'll write you a book. So every week I give you a concept, an inspirational quote, an inspirational story, a book recommendation on a book you should read, but you're probably too lazy because you're an adult. So I also give you a children's picture book recommendation that demonstrates the same concept. You read that in 5 minutes and look at the pictures. I've got the world's top reading engagement program online. And so last summer, I did a 5-day reading challenge for about 700 parents all over the world, where every day for an hour, I give you all kinds of strategies to get your kids to read more, read better, and most importantly, to love reading. I mean, I think schools do an adequate job of teaching kids how to read. But the question I always ask people is, well, what good is it teaching a kid how to read if they never want to? I teach kids why to read, because I've never had to tell a kid, go watch TV. I've never had to tell a kid, go play a video game. And I never want to have to tell a kid, go read. I want them to choose to do it because they love to do it. And there's simple strategies on how to do that. And for all your business listeners out there, I mean, if you start reading things properly, you get those anecdotes that we're talking about that you can start putting into your presentations to get people to take the audience to the next step. And so that's at freegiftfromdanny.com. And I just appreciate you, Mike. When you were talking about that teaching point, there's a great speaker, Joe Martin, and he talks about napkin leadership. He says when you go to a restaurant and you're given a napkin, is your first move to stuff it down your shirt and wait for others to serve you, or to put it over your arm and to serve others? And so hopefully we've given everybody some ideas on how that they can serve their audience. So whether or not they decide to do business with you, you've actually helped them improve themselves. So I appreciate you making that point, Mike.
I love that. Thank you so much, Danny, for being here. And this has been so much fun.
Thanks for all you do, Mike. God bless.